My only answer could be that temporary law was given to Israel. The law that was added 430 years later, that's the law of Moses, was right for the time. God gave it as a custodial guard and guide. It had its purpose, but now that they're supposed to have matured into Messiah, going back under that custodial guide would be as bad as going back to demonic service. That is very striking. Paul is very clear, and I think black and white in Galatians. He pulls out all the stops to convince people not to muddle the covenants. He goes so far as to say that Hagar represents Mount Sinai and the law given there, and that this Sarah is the symbol of freedom from that bondage. So if you now want to go back to the custodial guard that was given to Israel in the Old Testament time, you might as well go back to breaking your tie with Jesus, muddling the covenants. It's no better than demonic activity. That's why Paul is so clever and so forceful in Galatians. And one of our other questions I see has to do with, why is Paul then lenient in Romans 14? That if somebody's a vegetarian, they're weak. Be patient with them. That's Paul in one mode, if you like, where you have individual people who are not clear on this. They're still working on this. The observance of days is a matter of conscience. That's what he clearly says. Let's suppose they're vegetarians. They have hang-ups on various days. Be patient with them until they become more mature and understand this. That's one thing. However, when you get a whole church invaded by Judaizers, trying to get the whole lot to be circumcised and keep the whole law, Paul turns in a totally different direction. So it's a matter of the occasion. Paul is willing to be super diplomatic. If you want to go and have a ceremony in the temple and cut somebody's hair and finish a vow, he'll do it. If you want to insist on Timothy, the Jew, being circumcised, Paul will do it because of the Jews. But you bring somebody into a whole church and try to teach them to be Sabbath keepers, observing the new moons and so on, then Paul is taking a totally different tack. And he's so strong that he actually refers to Sinai, as he also does in 2 Corinthians 3. Sinai is bondage. It's a shadow. It's not the ultimate. It's the law of Moses in the letter. That dispensation, I'm using the word deliberately there, is over. The new dispensation began with John the Baptist, the greatest man ever, baptizing Jesus. And from then on, the gospel of the kingdom has been preached. And that will go on then until the end of the age when the kingdom finally comes. So I think that's what we're dealing with there. Paul is very diplomatic. He'll do practically anything if it helps him to win people for the faith. He'll go and be like a Jew to a Jew. He'll keep the Sabbath with the Jew if it helps him to win him. But you start messing with the church as a whole, and he goes into a different mode and condemns people for going back under the old covenant. You might as well serve the demons, he said. You're losing your salvation if you're going to insist on keeping the whole law. So I constantly ask people this, what is this whole law in Galatians? Paul said, you mustn't keep. If you get circumcised, he says, you're going to have to keep the whole law. Don't go there. So circumcision in the flesh is completely out for Paul there. Again, Paul says in Galatians, if I were still teaching physical circumcision, why in the world am I being persecuted? Because according to the law of Moses in the letter, both Jew and Gentile had to be circumcised physically to be part of the covenant. But in the new covenant, that is absolutely not true. So I think that's the distinction. And yes, for individuals who are still getting there, he says, be patient with them. And we need to do that.